and lots of staff that have joined us today. So we'd like to welcome everybody. We have a pretty short agenda, but a full one. We're going to start off with item B, and those are our board requests for information, RFIs, so that we can see where we are and prioritize those. And if any board member has any other requests, now would be a good time for you to add them to the list. Okay, turn on my screen. All right, so the first request, oh, sorry. Okay, so our first request from member Jacobs was, can a report be generated which separates ethnic demographic data provided voluntarily by ASD applicants for educator positions compared to the same demographic information of individuals hired without providing other identifiers like name, address, etc.? And we know that that one has not been filled yet. Dr. Bishop, could you speak to that?
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, and I believe that we had put this on hold because we were deep into negotiations and the talent management team is support for that. So I'll request from Matt Tieford how long that this RFI would take, if it's short-term or long-term, basically. Long-term being throughout the semester, short-term is within the couple of weeks.
Or a month.
Or a month.
Unfortunately, I'm having difficulty reading it looks like a link. Could you summarize for me what this project is?
Sure. It says, can a report be generated which separates ethnic demographic data provided voluntarily by ASD applicants for educator positions compared to the same demographic information of individuals hired? So we have prepared and shared with the board the personnel reports, which designate our demographics. But this is basically a comparison over the last 3 to 5 years of people who have applied demographics to people who have been hired demographics.
Right, and that will take some time. Currently, we capture, applicants can volunteer their demographic information, and we do maintain that for those individuals who are hired, but we don't currently, that I'm aware of, have that applicant demographic information captured for comparison's sake. So I would say we would need, a month conservatively particularly if it's to go back, and I'm not sure, frankly, how far back we can effectively go. It's certainly something we could do prospectively. So for this year's data, I would ask for a month to complete that project.
Okay. Member Jacobs, did you want to add anything? This was your request.
No, I think, Madam President, you and Dr. Bishop spoke to the intent and the information being requested. I just appreciate the administration working to accomplish it in a month. Seems fine and appropriate. I don't have any objection.
Okay, so then that would be short term, 1 month?
Yes. Madam President, just to clarify, we do not have prior year data captured, so it will be this year, and then moving forward, we can create some data banks for that.
I just have a question of clarification. So when applicants apply, the system that we use to the applicants, the system that they submit the application in does not capture isolated fields, or is that just not a field that we is because that is not information that we collect, period. So it's somewhere we just got to get it, right?
Specific to demographics regarding ethnicity, that would be voluntarily provided or not.
Right.
Other demographic information would be, we would be able to derive or make assumptions. But again, much of that either doesn't exist, at least in so far as it's not managed in the current report. So we would have to create something related to the applicants who weren't ultimately hired, so that we could compare to those whom we've hired. And we can, we'll candidly, we'll have to start gathering the data and seeing what we can gather by way of comparison. I'm not sure it will be complete as to all the interests within this request, but we'll see what we have once we start to gather that.
Yes, Madam President, may I speak?
Sure.
Also, our Senior Director of Equity and Compliance has met with Talent Management Senior Director Peggy Rankin, and when they did look to answer that, they did find that many applicants didn't provide that information. And they went further to say even on the summary to hire, many didn't identify. So it is something that they struggled to get prior years, especially due to the choice of sharing. So what we do have, we can go ahead and get that this year and move it forward. But they did, really, Sonia and Peggy did try to investigate into this and didn't have enough information.
Okay, Member Jacobs, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Just to follow up to Dr. Bishop, we're speaking that we don't have prior year information for prior years, and separating that fact from what I think we all agree makes sense is that not every applicant discloses, which is perfectly fine. But did we not collect information in the same way on a voluntary basis in past years where something changed within the last year?
I'll have Mr. Tieford address that.
To Member Jacobs, it would have been provided in the same way. It's simply whether or not we maintain that information in the system. Some information is provided or had historically been provided on a document maintained separately altogether from the application in the formerly known as the EEO office, now the OEC office. So that's part of the challenge, would be to discover those historic data.
Okay, so I think we're good on that item. Any other questions? Okay, so let's move on to the next one. This one is also from Member Jacobs. What would it look like for a 2.5 million or 5 million wedge for mental health in the budget? What would the opportunity cost be? There was information in the February Board Connect, and so can you?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. What we did was share some information that had been previously requested and or previously utilized in our district for looking at opportunities to really essentially reprogram or redesign. And so whether that was, I believe we simply used prior information for that. And I was, it's difficult to put it out there in a public document. We did share, for instance, with the board that if we didn't use ESSER 3 in this budget, it would look like 10 additional staff members per grade level or 10 additional kids per class. That was just to give a mind's eye picture, but we really would not go to classrooms first. We'd try to cut everywhere else, but we were trying to provide a sense of the depth of how much we used. And frankly, then, we did get questions from legislators that said, what, you're gonna put 10 more kids in a class? So what we thought would happen did, that they just pick up a sound bite. For us to gather people that would need to be in this decision-making process, from all divisions to redesign a program to capture money out of it would really cause some anxiety at this point in time, and we didn't pull them out. And it would be, those of you that were on the board when they looked at, just to give an example, there was a rumor that Central Middle School is being closed down because it was just came as a topic, and then it was the news for a month and the school came out. And so we're trying not to name something because simply put, a transition of time would take some. So what we provided the board was, when we did this in the past, to take the positions for FTE 40 health teachers and put them in the budget, this is how much that the cost of that was. When we looked at, so that the opportunity would be a separate health teacher, the opportunity cost. We also looked at middle school model, and prior to the latest middle school problem solving, that would have been quite a bit of funds, put back in. I believe we looked at a redesign of the Ignite program to access more, but there would be an opportunity cost for a change in programming. So we just put some items in there in addition to there's always FTE. If the board desires like a more in-depth look, we would for sure pull AEA leadership, principal leadership, district leadership into a meeting to have a discussion about it. And again, that would spark some angst at a time that we didn't need it. So if this is wanted over a longer period of time, how we would do this, we certainly would partake in that and invite people in and share ideas and truly have a plan, a longevity plan of change, and can do that. But what we did thus far was put in old requests and or prior budgets when we did propose a cost to something that had to change to put more money into core classrooms was the goal at that time. So we can continue or just hold off, kind of move through this year and then really have a larger discussion. Not sure where the board was on this. Certainly can be done. It just shouldn't happen just from the chiefs. Because then it will be, the chiefs want to cut us, and this is, it would look very differently and kind of blaze through the district. Mm-hmm. That's just how things have occurred.
So I guess my question to Member Jacobs is, was the information that superintendent just shared and the information in Board Connect what you were looking for, or did you want to clarify?
No, thank you, Madam President. I found the information enlightening and helpful. I don't have any other questions, and I hope the board found it enlightening as well as we have this conversation as well as next year's. Thank you.
All right. So in terms of, so then we can mark that one completed. Katie. Thank you. Oh, and that's it. We only had 2. Any other board members? Member Donnelly? You have a request?
Thank you, Madam President. I had several inquiries last couple of weeks, and I guess the question I would pose is, was any of the COVID impact funding contingent on mandatory masking per se? That's the question I've been getting from people.
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Oh, yeah, you can answer that real quick. Any other? You said did you have any other board members? Yes, Member Donnelly. I'm sorry, Holloman. Sorry.
I know we're the only 2 guys, but we're a little different. This actually kind of goes back to the recruitment issue. If there's an applicant that meets all the basic criteria, i.e. has a teaching certificate, has no criminal record, has, what I'm going to say, just no defect in terms of an employee, is there any reason that person wouldn't be interviewed and be found to be eligible for the higher list? And what I'm asking kind of indirectly, I think from my years in the district and just observing that anyone that meets the basic qualifications that doesn't have some issue generally goes on the eligible to be hired list and is out there to be interviewed. I get that. That's my question.
May I?
Dr. Bishop?
Yes, Madam President, may I ask our Chief Human Resource Officer, Matt Tiefer, to respond?
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Through the chair to Member Holloman, there is a screening function in the talent management area. The generalist and staff do a minimum qualifications review, and you're correct that if there's no flag, so to speak, through that process, either because of a failure to meet minimum qualifications or some other issue, either related to prior employment with the school district or could be a criminal background check issue, then it is forwarded for consideration by the hiring supervisor or principal.
And I think that's real close to what I'm asking. The point that I'm sort of making to the public and to the board is there was a time when you could meet all the basic qualifications. It was still rather difficult to get a job with the Anchorage School District because there were thousands of applicants, and people were screened looking for experience, looking for unusual talents, looking for something above the minimum that made them fit. And this is from me looking from the outside, so my picture may not be totally accurate. It changed around the year 2000 to where the eligible to be hired list evaporated to a much shorter list than what had been on it, and the applicant backlog evaporated as well. I think of it a lot in terms when we talk about wanting to broaden the diversity of our workforce. I think we should, but I think we're going to struggle to find people, period. Mm-hmm. And it makes me wonder what we do to attract people that fit the way we want them to fit to achieve what we're trying to do. A recent article in the Anchorage Daily News talked about a really high percentage of people coming out of the Philippines to fill positions in rural Alaska. And I'm assuming that rural districts are doing that because of a lack of U.S. citizens that are applying for those jobs. And not anything wrong with people from the Philippines at all, but it just seems like a U.S. citizen living in the U.S. Has a natural advantage in obtaining a job like that over someone from another country that's got immigration issues and certainly raises a flag about how long they might stay if they have family back in another country, et cetera, et cetera. I think it just speaks to the challenge we face, and the challenge comes from funding and from being able to make the job match the profession in terms of its desirability. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
There wasn't a request in that, just a comment. Is that correct? What was your request?
Basically right. I think I am. I may not have it exactly right.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions on our RFIs and list, we are ready to proceed to item C, which is our equity audit. Dr. Bishop.
Thank you, Madam President. This request has been on the work session for quite some time since last fall, and we've had other issues that were pressing that the board wanted to discuss. So I'm happy to say that we have the report completed, shared internally, and now we have the team of folks coming up, led by Senior Director Sonia Hunt. And Sonia, if you could introduce folks that will be presenting with you as they come up, and I'm going to turn this over to Sonia. In response, as you know, the board passed, I believe, last fall, so it was 2021, the anti-racism and equity policies. It might have even been the spring of 2020.
Yes.
So, okay, so April, just last year of 2022. So
2021.
2021 of spring. Okay. Boy, just COVID years fly
Yes,
by. So
2021.
last spring, a year ago, this spring, anti-racism and equity policies. So we have been working with those new policies. In addition to, prior to that time, the board finalized and refinalized its goals. Remember, the goals were written in 2019, early 2020, and the pandemic hit, and they were reaffirmed then in the fall of 2020, fully adopted then when this board came aboard in the summer of 2021. And so we've had these constructs before us. And prior to this time, we shared work that we did with Hanover in creating a dashboard. Mike Fleckenstein and his team provided the data to be able to inform how we wanted the dashboard to look and share. So that resides on our departmental website. But now there was a second part of that audit, and Sonia and her team are going to share pieces of it. So thank you. Turn it over to you, Sonia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bishop. To the president, to members of the board, my name is Sonia Hunt, and I serve as the Senior Director for the Office of Equity and Compliance. With me, I have my colleague,
Dante Powell. I'm an Equity and Compliance Specialist for the district.
and also I have my colleagues, Dr. Jennifer Knudsen, Dr. Kirsten Johnson-Strumpler, and Daniel Barker. So I wanted to get us started in grounding us in what buckets of work does the Office of Equity and Compliance cover? And as it relates to student impact and outcomes, we are the convener of equity for the Minority Leadership Program that seeks to attract and retain staff of color, particularly for the AEA, the Anchorage Education Association members, to be able to gain leadership, soft and hard skills that they need to be able to stay in their current jobs and lead in other ways. That program is in partnership with UAA and is worth 2 credits. We are also the convener of academic equity initiatives and you'll hear more about the Equal Opportunity Schools, which is our AP equity to increase the number of historically excluded students that are in AP courses and on that track. Also, we are the convener of the cultural competency training initiatives and to include, for example, our equity training, professional development worth 1 credit with the University of Alaska at Anchorage. We also manage our equal employment opportunity work, which really seek to protect and to ensure the rights of our adults that work with us every day through things like the American with Disabilities Act, Title IX education amendments for students as well, and our Title VII Civil Rights Act, just to name a few. We also manage interpreter services to ensure that community-facing events can include interpretation services to include our deaf community and for around language. We also manage volunteer services that, of course, ensure the safety and protections of students in our building in terms of screening our volunteers and making sure that they should be around children. And so our theory of action around this work, really, when we talk about the equity audit, is if we identify and address issues impacting student experience, then the disparity in achievement and experience will close over time. And along with that, we are certainly grateful for the adoptions of the anti-racism and instructional equity policies that passed on April 20th, 2021. In terms of our audit and alignment, the equity audit was based on several objectives. Of course, at the core of it was ASD's mission of educating all students for success in life. We also wanted to ensure ensuring of equity in student access and opportunities, identifying and eliminating barriers that prevent full participation for all student groups, and certainly for a comparison of student experience within the Anchorage School District. And I can pause at any time. Okay. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we wanted to make sure that we really reached a cross-section of our stakeholders So internal and external stakeholders were engaged in this process. And it included the Anchorage Education Association members, which again include our teachers, counselors, nurses, to name a few, our cabinet, our community, to include parents and grassroots organizations, principals, and of course, our students. Student voice was key in this process. And so the process of identification really was three, I don't want to call them three projects within one initiative, if you will. And so it's the equity data analysis scorecard and dashboard, which I'll show you how you can visit it. It was presented last year, but certainly I can show you how to get to it on our website so that it's accessible to everyone. And so that was the part A. Part B was the actual equity audit, which was a mixed methods approach. So we wanted to make sure that a review of quantitative data occurred, as well as the stories of our stakeholders to fill in lines, basically, or the story behind the numbers that we're seeing. And you'll see later on in the presentation how it really looks similar. And the third part of it is the district equity planning and communication infographic. So if you've seen, and this is just a printed copy of the, I'm sorry, I'm a visual learner and I assume other people are at times as well. So I got mine bonded and I have a few more copies if anybody would like. On the last page, you will see something that is meant to serve as a one-pager, really, well, two-pager, one-pager, right? But it kind of like succinctly gives an overview of the initiatives that have gone on thus far and provides some more information on the back, which I'll get to later on in the presentation. And so that, of course, includes our equity guiding questions that our schools and programs use to further this work, as well as tips for extending conversations about this work for communities and families and students older and younger. So our equity dashboard, if you visit departments on the ASD website and you go to the Office of Equity and Compliance and you look at the left-hand panel, you'll see equity dashboard. And then you can click launch the dashboard. And this is the page that you will see in the equity. And what you'll see is a picture of our outcomes, and you can feel free, and it's over a process of 6 years. So it's 2014-15 all the way to 19-20. And you can peruse by school as shared before last year, and school year and grade level. And it really covers three broad areas: academics, discipline, and school programming. And what you see on this slide are something all too familiar, right? We've been working on goals and guardrails with fidelity, from reading proficiency to math proficiency, college, career, and life ready. And many of our guardrails are 4 guardrails. And what our audit showed, the quantitative recommendations based on the quantitative data done by Hanover recommends 3 things: to target new teacher recruitment towards minority teachers, to investigate further into the performance gaps that exist between students of different racial and ethnic groups, evaluate access to advanced courses and the identification process for gifted education. And so again, we wanted to be able to hear from our stakeholders. And so panels were engaged. We had focus groups, We had sort of a survey that went out to AEA members to be able to get that feedback. And what it found was something very similar than what the quantitative review found. So the bond group's recommendations were: improve access to school choice and programs, increase educator diversity and capacity, improve parity in education funding, and maintain our equity conversations. And so the next slide shows what I showed you here. It's meant to be kind of like, you sometimes at the end of a workbook, you have that perforated page. And so it's meant to be a one-pager, easily read by community members, by parents, lots of infographics used to be able to tell the story of what we've been doing around equity. And so the first page is what you see. And this is the back. The following page is the back of what you see. And what you really see, again, are the equity goals and guardrails, or our goals and guardrails. You see district actions, and you see the policies that have gone forward. And continuing on the back, you see the 4 guiding questions that are used in our schools and our programs. And you see tips for two-way communications with our parents and our families, as well as conversation starters for our younger and older students. And to just go a little further and give you some examples of our action steps that we've been doing. So for example, with the Ignite program, and Dr. Knudsen and Drs. Knudsen and Johnson Strumpler can share more about that. With the Ignite program, for example, that the utilization of assessment scores are placed in some sort of a priority before even teacher recommendation, to be able to kind of mix the bag on how we receive referrals for our students, to be able to increase their opportunity and access.
I can actually share that one.
Okay, sure.
With the universal use of MAP, in 2016, we had very few classrooms and programs using it. Now we have the MAP growth assessment 3 through 9. And prior to really having a district-wide assessment, the students who were assessed for gifted were a teacher recommendation. And it might occur to you that there's sometimes students' behaviors, primarily our little boys, weren't getting as many recommendations because sometimes the behavior affected whether, and there were literally things written about whether they deserve it or not. And so we flipped that. Instead of getting a recommendation and then testing, we now have a very fair way that all kids are given an assessment. And we're looking at it going and scanning, oh, these are the top students. Now let's follow through with the recommendation procedure to continue. And so that was just one example that was pretty significant in our district that kind of changed and flipped the services and the manner in which we look for gifted and talented. Before recommendation, it's actually their ability, which is by our universal screener and universal assessment has worked. And students who have had poor behavior, sometimes you can ask, is it the chicken or the egg? Are they having the poor behavior because their needs aren't met academically? And so now we're capturing these, especially young little boys, into the program.
I had a quick follow-up question on that process. How does that work for English language learners who may not score very highly because of a language barrier, but may be ready to engage more deeply in the way that Ignite is designed to do?
We can ask Dr. Knudsen to come forward. We do take that into consideration. And actually, Dante, if you just want to pull up an extra chair, that's fine.
Get cozy here. So we are looking at different groups of students and making sure we have equitable access to the program. So one of the things that we do is we look at local norms at some of our schools. So we're comparing kids' performance compared to other kids' performance that might have similar language proficiency and that type of thing. The other thing that we're doing is when we do the screener now at second grade, so we have the MAP screener for achievement, but we're also this year screening kids with ability at second grade level. And what that does is it's shifting the model, like Dr. Bishop said, for them to find us, for us to find them. And so by doing that, it's a nonverbal piece so that we can capture a lot of our kids that might have English as a second language that might help with that. So those are a couple of the things that we're doing to address different needs of kids.
Yeah, and a lot of the research is about, do we, on equity work, are we lowering our standards to get more kids involved? And the answer is no. What we're doing is finding different ways to find the genius in kids to make sure that we're not missing anyone. And doing the assessment first was a very critical piece because it was value neutral. It's like, what do the kids have and what do they own? And we're finding that then following through with those recommendations. Because we've all been teachers where someone, maybe by behavior, never demonstrated the smarts, and you never really, as a teacher, got to see it because of the behavior. So then you wouldn't recommend. But now we can are testing for the genius in all our kids.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, Dora.
No, I
Member Wilson.
mostly a comment. I had the privilege of touring our Gifted in Learning this year, and got to learn about how they're identifying students and the work being done and how it's changed. And I really appreciate the work that they're doing and how it has changed. And we're working to identify those students rather than waiting for teachers to recommend them for so many reasons. I do believe that this is helping with identifying students across the district. There is one other comment. I did receive a comment from a parent who's very involved in the community, and her daughter was identified as a Gifted in Learning student. And her daughter actually came home crying and said, "I can't believe they think I'm smart," because she also has an IEP. So I just wanted to provide that feedback that was a tearjerker for me. But if you could also comment about how students are identified across the district, including Title I schools.
Yeah, well, and if I can also address that, addressing the underrepresentation in our gifted program was really the result of our board guardrails. And it really shifted the conversation for how do we provide Ignite services, or how do we change them, to how do we address it, the underrepresentation, and how do our services align to that? How does our identification align to that as well? So what happens is students, we look at map data. So we have an assessment team that reviews all of our map data, and we look at students who fall within a certain range. And I don't have the exact cut scores with me. We could always provide that for you as a follow-up in Board Connect. But we look for kids that meet those criteria. By adding on the screener this year at second grade, we're also looking at, are there kids that we are missing that might be underachievers but have high ability scores? Mm-hmm. So by looking at these two things, it's helping us make sure we're catching all kids. And we're actually working with a researcher from Wisconsin who looks at giftedness across the country and equity within giftedness. And one of the things they're evaluating, to what Dr. Bishop said, is, does that provide us any more information that we don't already get from MAP? So we're really looking at it scientifically as well as qualitatively in kids' experiences. Then what we have is it's called a multiple pathways approach to qualification for Ignite specifically. So where kids get points for different aspects. So for the ability test, for the MAP testing, teacher recommendation is last on the list, but you get points for that. So a student can qualify in any combination of those points. And what that does is it allows our students' strengths to get points, instead of ruling them out with one cut score and you're out of the competition for getting into Ignite, for example. So we're looking at multiple aspects of that, starting with our data and student performance. And then for our Title I schools, it's looking at those normative data for those schools and comparing kids to that instead of a national norm.
Mm-hmm. Member Lessons.
Thank you. Could you, I feel like I should know the answer to this. Does Ignite exist at all of our schools?
Yes, at every single school, kids have access to Ignite. Okay. There are a few schools where we bus kids to a different location just because of size and stuff like that of the program, but every school has access to Ignite program.
Okay, let's continue with your report, and then we'll come back to more questions.
Thank you to the president, members of the board, Dr. Bishop. And so our next item, I invite Dr. Johnson-Strumpler up to talk a little bit about our Equal Opportunity Schools program, which is, again, a cross collaboration between departments, and excellent work is happening. ask the pause for you to just kind of mention some stuff with our EOS.
Sure. All 8 of our large high schools, our comprehensive high schools, are participating now in equal opportunity schools. And as you've heard previously, Equal Opportunity Schools is a partner of ours, and it targets inviting many of our underrepresented populations to our advanced placement and IB coursework. So what we do is work with our schools to get more of our underrepresented students into advanced placement and IB courses. So 4 of our schools started last year, and then the other 4 high schools that did not participate last year are now participating this year. The first year, schools go through a process of surveying students and faculty and parents, and doing a bunch of outreach work. And then the second year, they work with students to actually enroll them in those courses and support them in their coursework, and continue their mission. So we're seeing a lot of good results out of that work, and I'm just really excited about what we're seeing there.
Yeah. And some of that, we saw some presentations, and again, a lot of this is they scan GPAs of students, they scan test scores of students in the high schools then, and say, okay, of these that are all scanned, they're in the top achievement levels. Why are some kids choosing AP and why not? And so then that's when they dig down into those pieces. And as you know, one of the things we're finding is that cultural capital. If you had a parent that was most likely an AP, they had a mind's eye to ask for it. When we have kids who are absolutely their achievement, their ability, they're making A's, have the competency to enter AP, but are not, those are this equal opportunity schools basically gives you, these are the students that are not represented, and they are from all different boys, girls, all different ethnicities and races. It's identifying the undertapped students in schools that have the competency but are not enrolled. And so then we dig deep and find out their stories, then we share that information, and then we move it down to middle school. And now middle school is saying, wait a minute, we need to move it down to elementary school to ensure that all kids have, again, that 3rd grade proficiency in math and reading to have these choices. Yeah. But it's, again, using data to find information that we didn't know because no one asked. No one sat with a counselor and knew that my child should be an AP.
Yep. It's creating great conversations at our high schools, the right conversations, in my opinion, of how we approach kids and invite them to the table and challenge them and create opportunities for them. So I'm really excited about just some of the conversations that are happening in our counseling offices with families and kids, and getting them to challenge themselves and make them more self-confident. So.
Okay. Next up is our professional development that continues. That's across departments. And while the Office of Equity and Compliance is a convener, certainly it's happening. It's baked into all the work across the district. In terms of our next steps, we'll continue to engage our stakeholder groups, continue in strategic planning, and building partnerships and collaborations. And as a reminder, this work is all driven by educating all students for success in life. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. So now we will open up for questions from the board. Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam President. Director, back in fall of 2020, when you reported to the board, you mentioned that your plan was to utilize authors such as Ingrid and Kendi in developing these policies. I was wondering which of these policies, or if any of them, were influenced by Mr. Kendi's works.
To the president, to members of the board, the policies were adopted by the board. It's the anti-racism, the equity policy. There were policies that were managed by the board and adopted by the board.
That's technically accurate. I guess what I'm looking at is this development from your office. It's, I guess, based on something from Hanover. But And in particular, I'm interested in the development of the equity conversations for parents and families and the equity conversations for students. Were those influenced at all by the works of Mr. Kendi?
They weren't. To the president, members of the board, they were not. This was in collaboration with Hanover, who works with districts across the country, in ensuring that all children's students' experience looks similarly. And this is just a way of extending the conversation.
Well, I guess I would speak for the probably hundreds and hundreds of parents that have expressed a concern with me regarding what could be included in such equity conversations for students. I mean, it's quite subjective what fair means and why it's important to be fair, and what things you can do to make sure things are fair depends very highly on what is being conveyed as fairness. And I think parents out there that have talked to me have legitimate concern that several years ago, the district sponsored basically courses in critical race theory for something like 130 of our employees. And, you know, in the military, they have a saying, you know, you fight the way you train. And if we trained people to think that way, or, you know, did that kind of educational for them, and then now they're going to be charged with asking questions such as, what does it mean to be fair? I mean, I think parents would have a legitimate fear that some of that training might be injected into that process. What kind of assurances can you offer to parents that it won't be?
I see
Madam
Dr. Bishop's
President.
hands up.
Yeah, so I would just say that we've demonstrated, and we know how you feel about that. You've shared it with us, and we continue to share back the same thing. But I would say, what does it mean to be fair? The change in how we look at assessment scores before and this is for white kids, every kid. This is, and primarily the change was in little active boys who sometimes got in trouble in class because they were so active. But whether they're black or brown or whatever, but the fairness issue was that one change in how we did business was about fairness. And so I'm not against fairness.
Quality issue. I mean, that they were treated equally based on merit and based on the objective standards. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so those are the
than
types
a subjective analysis of what is fair.
Well, the discussion is all going to be subjective because we're all coming from different places. And then we come to an agreement of how do we make our district better? And again, from day one, it has been with the lottery, you know, just with that. It hasn't been to limit the lottery. It is like mathematically, if you want to get more kids in lottery programs, you better darn well have more kids in the lottery of color. So how do you do that then? And what are the barriers? Not that we're trying to change an outcome, but that we're trying to not make the system be the determinant of the outcome, that everybody has an equal opportunity. And that's what we're after, because some really don't, because of whether it was transportation or I didn't know, I didn't have the information because I don't actually, as a parent, read English. So then my kid lost out because I didn't send in a notice right away. So we're trying to really think of how do we look at these kids and find who they are? And that's what this is about. And again, I just reiterate that we were presented with an anti-racism and equity policy, and we're trying to build capacity in our system for it.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Mr. Jacobs, I see your mic's on.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Just a follow-up, I guess, to really clarify, as words matter. It was just stated that the district basically had trainings, I think was the operative word, on critical race theory. Can I confirm that's accurate? Have we required staff to participate in a training on critical race theory?
To the president, to members of the board, no. The answer to that is no.
Thank you. Madam President, can I ask a different question on a different topic?
Sure.
Just clarify. I never intended to say or said that it was mandatory, but it was offered for free to our instructors or staff that wish to take the course. and it was sponsored by our university, our school district.
With the member Donnelly, you are really misrepresenting a whole process, because that is not entirely true. What happened is that through our normal professional development avenue, which is a partnership with UAA, staff were given the opportunity, if they chose, to take a certain course or have a book study. And professionally, I think our staff, I would stand today and forever for staff to be able to have that choice. It was not a required, it had nothing. You have attached the critical race theory to the books that were on the website and to the classes that staff were taking. That is you. That has nothing to do with this board. And that misrepresentation really is unfair.
And Madam President, if I may, I don't think I've misrepresented it at all. In fact, when I first investigated this, I was told, don't blame the university for this. Those are the exact words that were given to me. This was something we did, and we asked the university to put on.
It is still for adults who have a choice. We are not in the business of requiring adults to take to dictate what they take and what they don't. Well, but you are implying things that were really not true.
I didn't imply that at all, and
yes,
I didn't misrepresent it at all. I never said this was a mandatory. This was a voluntary offering that we initiated. This district initiated.
No.
And I was clearly told it didn't come from the university; it came from this district.
Okay, then we will agree.
And if you want to have a debate whether the source materials that were used in those courses are critical race theory or not, I'm happy to do that. Because they clearly are critical race theory
advocates. None of the authors are critical race theorists. That is your application to the book.
Mr. Kendi's not a critical race theorist?
Mr. Kendi is an author.
He's a critical race theorist.
He's not a critical race theorist.
Oh, come on. Let's just
Member Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam President. So a follow-up question regarding the presentation. First, I want to thank the effort that staff put forth in facilitating the development of the findings, and I'm interested in digging in a bit deeper, I guess. Is the data available that we could request maybe on Board Connect to see specific breakdowns for how different stakeholder groups, what their specific feedback was, or is there just these general kind of takeaways that the board could receive at this point?
To the president and members of the board, at this point, there are general takeaways. What I can do is follow up in Board Connect with any specific questions and to engage the auditors in the process.
May I follow up, Madam President?
One more follow-up, and then member Lessons.
So thank you, Madam President. So the intent is really just, I'm interested to see if there was differing perspectives from the community versus staff versus students, and I think that's data would be especially valuable, and so I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Member Lessons. Oh, before you, I need to just, for the record, Member Higgins has joined us online.
Thank you for the presentation. I've already used the dashboard multiple times. It assists me in understanding our progress monitoring reports because I can dive more deeply into things. I've had some great conversations with community members based on what I found. And I appreciate the boundaries that understanding the data exists over that 6-year span. A question would be, will it be updated as we move forward, or is that data set going to be kind of static? What do you envision?
To the president and members of the board, we anticipate moving forward and updating it regularly every year. And that is dependent on funding to be able to ensure that happens.
Thank you. Oh, I had one quick comment. Okay. I did want to say that as a parent of young children who are siblings, children have a very astute sense of fairness and what is and isn't fair. If you talk to anybody under the age of 10, they know when a cookie is cut in half or not. So I do think that these are age appropriate, and I support the framing that this is, if you look at the first source, how can two-way communication can boost parent engagement. And I hope that we all know that parent engagement is, it's a secret sauce to educational success. So if we can engage our parents and hook them into supporting their students where they're at, even if it's, let's talk about how we divide this cookie, guys. Is it fair? If we cut it this way, who will be excluded? I mean, those are, you can work on fractions too. So anyways, I see that as a parent of young children.
Thank you so much.
So I just have a question about the student voice. Could you explain the process? How did you connect with students and just give us a little overview of what they had to say?
Sure. To the president, members of the board, we were able to engage our student governance for ASD in this process. So it's the group that regularly meets a few times a year.
SAB?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. And so they were engaged in the process. So that was the student body.
So in the recommendations from Hanover, the one that said investigate further into performance gaps, do we have a plan to do that yet, or is that still in the for all of the recommendations? Where are we on? Yes, those. I get the target. These are all part of either our goals or our guardrails, whether it's proficiency in reading and math or teacher, getting underrepresented groups in our charter schools. Have we given have we done any work on how we're going to get kids into the charter schools? That might be for you, Dr. Bishop.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Really, all of the guardrails are in process now to present a plan and build capacity, and most of them are gathering this year baseline data to move forward. For that particular one, whereas we can look and see kind of the kids when they are in the school, the guardrail is to increase students entering the lottery. And so we don't have information on their demographics. So we had to actually rewrite the program, and then people have to answer that if they want, but it is going to be suspect. Why would you ask me that? Because we didn't ask it before. So we're trying to really share it. It is for this, that there still is, the lottery is audited. It is not, by demographic reserve. So we're moving into this very cautiously and really thinking about the implications of how we gather data. We certainly don't want to keep anyone from entering. At the same time, we want to kind of rise the tide for all ships. So, but each one of these, whether it is looking at the gaps, really the monitoring is part of that, and the data conversations at schools. Individual schools literally have conversations about who are our kids being successful and who are not. And then they engage with the teachers about why, like, what do you think? And whom are the kids? And sometimes it's related back to, what they know, a course that they took, teachers, having the basic skills, different things. So it is, the web of the information and what can be done is pretty, it's deep. So
great. Okay. Any other board member questions or comments? Seeing none, I thank you for your report. And can I get a copy of the PowerPoint?
Yes, we'll make a copy of that, and it's posted online for community as well, but we'll get you hard copies.
Great. If it's posted, I can get it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Great job. Thank you. Good work.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Let's see.
Thank you, Sonia and team.
So that brings us we're now at the end of our work session agenda. Need a motion to adjourn into executive session.
Madam President, I move we adjourn into special session for the purposes of uncontested student hearings, negotiations, and contracts.
Executive session, yes.
Okay. I'm not sure what I said, but yes.
Special. That is kind of special, huh? All right.
I'll second.
Who second? Okay. All right.